Good afternoon to everyone. I am Guido Rianna and I work for Mediterranean Center of Climate Change, Fondazione CMCC. Today it is my pleasure to moderate the very interesting webinar presenting the main findings of the Interreg Central Europe project Teacher. The project will started in March 2020 and will end in February 2022. It is aimed at assuring an effective adaptation for water management in Central Europe. Today, we will have two very interesting talks. The first one will be given by Professor Barbara Curk from the University of Ljubljana, coordinator of the project. She will give an overview about the approach, the consortium, the rationale, the expected outcomes, and then the results. The second talks will be given by Professor Primo Banov, again from the University of Ljubljana. He led the work package engaged for the development of the CC-ARP-CE Toolbox, Climate Change Adaptation Risk Prevention in Central Europe. Okay, before leaving the floor to two speakers, I would like to give a few details about my research center, Fondazione CMCC. CMCC, Mediterranean Center of Climate Change, was established in 2005, but it became a foundation in 2015. CMCC, it is a scientific research center on climate change, its interaction with society, environment, and the world of business and decision making. Our aim is that of assuring a sustainable growth, environmental protection, and developing strategies for mitigation and adaptation of climate change. CMCC is organized in the form of a network distributed through the country. We have seats in Milano, Bologna, Venezia, Viterbo, Caserta, Lecce, and Sassari, which involves and connect public and private entities working together on multidisciplinary studies concerning issues related to the climate change science. CMCC also benefits from the extended applied research experience of members and institutional partners, Università di Bologna, Ca' Foscari, Politecnico di Milano, Università della Tuscia, Centro Italiano di Ricerca Spaziale, Istituto Nazionale di Geofisica e Vulcanologia, Università di Bologna, Research for the Future. The center is structured in 11 research divisions, which share different knowledge and expertise in the field of climate science. How to characterize our work? Which are the best keywords characterizing our work? We develop scenarios and simulation for characterizing the climate in the future. We are involved in project, services, and activities. We study the interaction and the involvement of climate change on in different fields and their consequences on the society, on the policies, on the, in terms of modeling, in terms of the adaptation and the mitigation, on different fields, on agriculture, on forest, on ecosystem services, on hydrological hazards. Nevertheless, we have also widely involved in outreach and communication activities. We published several papers in international journals. We are involved in educational programs, events, and communication activities to the public at large, also in dissemination activities like this webinar. So, after the two talks, we will have a few rules about the webinar. After the two talks, we will have a Q&A session, but in the specific, I would like to invite you to intervene by using the Q&A section in the bottom part of the panel. Before the canonical Q&A section, we will have a brief Menti section to collect your feedback and your insight. Then please take your smartphone at hand, only use your PC, and connecting you to www.menti.com using the code in the slides. Finally, I would like to recall that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on CMCC YouTube channel. But if you have any further question about the webinar, please email at the email address reported in the slides. So now it is my pleasure to leave the floor to the first speaker, Professor Barbara Curk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guido, for this nice introduction. Let me share the screen. I think it's what is now in the presentation. Well, do you see the presentation?
Yes, we see your screen.
No, but it's no, not presentation mode. No.
No.
Just let me check. It was working before. Maybe I have some issues with my PowerPoint. If I start again. Okay, so now it's working. Good. Good afternoon, everybody, dear ladies and gentlemen. I will present the Teacher CE project, which is now coming towards the end. And first, for the introduction, I have to explain the complexity of integrated water resources management, which was also the main topic of this project. So very important is that actually if we go from the natural side point of view, we are looking for the international management, not so for transboundary river basins, but more exchange of know-how among countries. And then we have environmental objectives of the good status of quality, ecology, and quantity of waters. And we are focusing on surface water and groundwater, but not mainly from this status point of view, but from hazard point of view. If we look the surface water, it's mainly the flooding and heavy rains. And if we look the groundwater, we study drinking water protection. Wetlands are also important and natural-based solutions for the flood protection. Actually, we focus on environment, but we do not focus on health, economy, and transport. The most important is that we integrate many disciplines, because we need hydrologists, hydraulics engineers, we need hydrologists, we need also expert in land use, spatial planning, in order to come to the measures which are very important for the flood protection, drought mitigation, and drinking water protection, that we can really achieve these objectives. Moreover, it is very important to involve all decision-making levels, from the national, which is our actually boundary condition with the legislation, regional, and then also local. The local, these are the communities, municipalities who are actually dealing with such problems such as weather-related hazards. So these are all decision-making, and also all other stakeholders in civil society who can help. And at the end, you will see we elaborated a comprehensive catalog of measures, which is very important for the drought mitigation, flood mitigation, and drinking water protection. So if we start with the project, Teacher CE stands for Joint Efforts to Increase Water Management Adaptation to Climate Changes in Central Europe. This is Central Europe program. The project lasts 2 years and will end at the end of February next year. We have 20 partners collaborating in this project. These 20 partners are coming from 8 countries. So we have actually all Central Europe countries in the project. We have also 18 associated partners, which are our target groups, our stakeholders. They help us to for the feedback of the toolbox, for the feedback for all results. The partnership consists of research institutions, authorities, basin authorities, water authorities, and some international organizations like Global Water Partnership, and also ministries. In this project, actually, we made a synergy of projects which already finished within the Interreg Central Europe program. And these were 4-part projects, which were all dealing with weather-related risk and climate change. The first one is Rayman, who was dealing with heavy rain-related risk. And in this project, Rayman Toolbox was developed. Another one is FRAMWAT, where flood and drought mitigation was studied. Here, FRAMWAT tools for floods, droughts, and pollution mitigation were developed. In SUS3, they focused on climate change and forest management. And at the end, or at least but not last, ProLine C project focused on climate change and drinking water resources management, including flood mitigation. Actually, also other projects were exploited, or some results were used in our toolbox. But the most important are these 4 Central European projects, where we actually merged the results into our project. The goal of the Teacher CE project was to elaborate or to develop a toolbox for climate-proof management of water-related issues, such as floods, heavy rain and risk prevention, drought risk prevention, and protection of water resources through sustainable land use management. With this, we developed a toolbox for strategies and measures for climate change adaptation and prevention of related risk. And this was done with or through intense interactive stakeholders involvement on the national, regional, or local level. And at the end, with interaction with these target groups and with this downstreaming of our tools, we developed strategy for water management adaptation in climate change prevention or reduction of related of climate change related risk. So main focus or main problems which we are addressing is climate change and drinking water resources management, climate change and forest management, and heavy rain related risk, and flood and drought mitigation. And with this partnership and activation of synergies of existing tools and stakeholder involvements and testing in 9 pilot actions, we developed integrated toolbox and strategy for water management planning processes. Actually, the workflow, if I present it only shortly, first we made the concept and we studied all these existing projects, and with the national stakeholder workshops, we set the boundary conditions for our toolbox. The main or the core of the Teacher CE project is Integrated Toolbox for Climate Change Adaptation and Risk Prevention, which will be presented by my colleague Primož Banovec. So you will see all this, the concept of the toolbox and how it's working after my presentation. So this toolbox was actually tested by pilot project partners and also in 9 pilot actions, which are all over the Central Europe. And after that, we tested this toolbox also with stakeholders, so we get the feedback from them in order to improve the toolbox. At the end, we came to action plan for implementation of the teacher toolbox. We called it CC-ARP-CE, and we developed strategy for water management planning processes, which includes also climate change adaptation and risk prevention. And we came to that final goals, such as toolbox and strategy, with actually combining 4 Central European projects with merging or all these tools and results which were done already in this project. But Teacher CE actually is then more comprehensive toolbox, which enables complex management of the climate change adaptation and risk prevention. The project website you can find on the Interreg Central EU page. We have also Facebook page, but the link to the toolbox you will find also in this Interreg Central Europe page. Thank you for your attention.
Now we'll give the floor to Primož for his talk. You are mute.
Hello, everybody. My name is Primo Banovec. I am assistant professor at the University of Ljubljana, Faculty of Civil and Geodetic Engineering, and my specific, let's say, field of work is hydraulic engineering and flood management. But in this teacher project, me and my group, we are developing the toolbox, which I will present today to you, hoping also for some feedback and successful exchange of information. So let's go to, first I'm starting with the PowerPoint presentation. Sharing my screen. See? Okay, we're here. Yes, excellent. So the aim of the toolbox, and it's always quite, let's say, challenging to develop any toolbox. So I start basically with this presentation. Yep. It's objective of the toolbox development, and usually I think we should all start and talk not another web toolbox, please. And this is a big challenge because we are somehow confronted with so many toolboxes, and so it's really difficult to position another toolbox in our day-to-day management framework. Basically, what we did in our project is we first performed a gap identification to identify what is already done from the point of view of existing toolboxes and supporting tools addressing water management and the climate change, and what might be and would be useful for users in our participating countries to help them really to address specific and missing issues which are not yet so much addressed in our work. So the result of this gap identification was this schematic framework which I will develop. So in the center of this process is our toolbox, which is actually connecting several dimensions which we consider that are not so much addressed in our existing national toolboxes. One perspective I will show also in the toolbox is supporting the cooperation and participation of different stakeholders in the participatory management and decision making on our river basins, which means that basically that users, different kind of users, are recognizing the issues, water management issues, which are important for them. They also identify the measures which are aimed to resolve the identified issues. And this is one, let's say, component, one tool in our toolbox. Another dimension of our toolbox identified as important is that we are usually very much knowledgeable on our existing national tools, which exist for flood management, drought management, water quality management, but have rather complicated access to the tools in our neighboring countries. So it's difficult, for example, for Italy, to know which are the key tools where you can find the flooding in Slovenia, which is neighboring country, in Austria, which is again neighboring country, well, then again also for the Switzerland and France, but they are not the Central European countries, so they are not addressed, sorry, in our project. Another link, and this is why also we consider this as a toolbox, is the link to existing toolboxes developed separately in previous projects. As Barbara said, these are Proline, Sastri, Rheinen, Framvat, Danube. So it's kind of, we are aiming at some kind of node, a meeting point, in which all users would see useful to find useful information, either on their specific addressed issues, but also to navigate through the world of information on their national platforms, but also on the network or the platforms of other countries, which might be interested in it. Last but not least, it's also important that we include it with the important input of Guido and Italian partners, the information on the climate change indicators. The climate change indicators are sometimes in national framework not straightforward accessible. You have to browse, you have to look through different national institutions to identify the trends and information to see what is expected to change. So basically this tool is also addressing in a special way the information of expected climate change. So these are the key modules, which means participation module, navigation through different national toolboxes, links to existing previous projects, link to decision-making process on the measures, and link to the information on the climate change indicators, which are in the Central Europe, defined as a basis for decision-making process. So the first start is a hope start. We will see it later. And the next component is identification of the issues and link to the climate data related to specific issues. User can add a new issue, which means you can add, oh, I think that in this location, we have problems with fluvial flooding. In these problems, I have other user can have problem with urban pluvial flooding, drought management issue, drinking water supply issue, erosion issues. So we have these issues structured based upon the field of action. And the field of action are structured, of course, that you can select and filter your issues on your area very efficiently to identify what is the issue you are actually more interested in. For example, I don't know, the farmers might have more interest in drought management, The urban planners have more interest in pluvial management, flood pluvial management. So we differed, so it's aimed at different users. So we will see it a little bit later on live presentation, but just to start understanding which are these main components of our toolbox, we can browse through it, and then I'm moving to the next slide. Okay, with the issue, of course, you can comment, see who has reported the issue, and also provide different comments on the issue, evaluate measures. So it is quite, let's say, complex process related to the already identified issues. So yeah, the next page. The next page is related to the identification of climate indicators. We can see all the countries which were part of our teacher project. Not only teacher project, but teacher project and Central Europe identified regions. So of course, not all Germany is identified as a Central European country. Also not the entire Italy is identified as a Central European. These are borders of the Central Europe. The resolution we have decided upon is mainly following the NACE third level, which means the European statistical regions as identified here. So we can see that Slovenia has identified 12 regions, statistical regions, whereas in Italia we can see regioni. I think that at least here we can see as a neighboring region to Slovenia, Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. So the basic information is aggregated on the level of this spatial entity, which is quite important in order to have the adequate resolution, which is somehow not too much, but not too high resolution, but then again, of course, not identifying the resolutions with too low resolution. When you are browsing through the information on the climate change indicators, you of course select using the tool the indicator, the time horizon. You have available selection in the database 2 time horizons, 2050, and then the next time horizon is reaching up to 21, which means end of this century. And of course, we are addressing 2 possible IPPC RCP scenarios. The scenario 4.5, which is somehow evaluated as a balanced midway probable scenario, and the information on the RCP scenario 8.5, which is of course identified by the IPCC as a pessimistic IPCC scenario. Unfortunately, I think that perhaps following the quite late reduction of CO2 emissions and observing our trends, we are probably not very already now somewhere in between the realistic scenario, midway scenario, and the pessimistic scenario. So the developments, we are now in 2021, approaching 2022, and already with these emissions and the reduction of emissions, which is not so big, we might be approaching more towards RCP scenario 8.5. The next tool, it's interesting that we actually provided just links, but links on information of more detailed information of the projects we are integrating. And Barbara was explaining a little bit about these projects. I think that if anybody is interested in a specific thematic, like for example, the project SASTRI, which is very much oriented towards the forestry service in comparison to other projects, definitely the most forestry service project. He can also go directly to the web page of the SASTRI, but also to the other projects. The next page is ranking and catalog of measures. In this page, we have provided the AHP multi-criteria method for the evaluation of the measures and identification of the measures which might be most suitable for the specific user and specific user criteria. So we have provided 4x4 metrics of the AHP multi-criteria process with some potential pre-filtering, and it proved to be quite interesting or useful tool for the users, which can in this way identify, I would say, a prioritized list of the measures which are more suitable for a specific challenge, following their priority criteria. Another, which is the last one, and then we will move to the live presentation of the toolbox, is the reference EU and national links. While we usually know European Union pages, where we can find some useful information on water management and climate change, and probably also our national pages where we can find, and we usually also use them, perhaps even daily, when we are addressing the water management and climate change issues. It is always interesting to navigate through the pages of other countries, which have sometimes quite similar or almost the same contents. But on the other hand, we can also observe that solutions, criteria, and the material shown on those pages for other countries could be quite different. Just to summarize, platform for the identification, specific individualized identification of important water management issues on addressed catchment. That is one thing. Revision of the measures, climate change adaptation process support, navigation among the tools, different project tools on the EU level and country level, and what we probably are not addressing yet, but it might be also useful, and we have identified, is also some post-event analysis. We are aiming also on some later information. This is not implemented yet, to enable also some information after the project occurrence during the development of our project. Also, the very tragic event in Germany. You probably were also following it, with the floods and more than 100 casualties occurred in Germany. And it is always important to understand why this tragic event has occurred from the point of view of the incurred hazard, vulnerability which was in that zone, measures which were implemented and were not implemented, but nevertheless, the forensic analysis would show an important, tragic, but still important learning experience for other water managers in Europe, to understand that in similar realities also our citizens might be at risk, but they are not really perhaps even aware of that. For this part, this is a photo of the core team. Due to the COVID, we were really have limited occurrence and possibility to meet each other. Nevertheless, you see, once we have actually met at the very beginning of the COVID crisis. So just now move to the live presentation, and just move to the live presentation of our tool, which means I'm skipping how our tool actually looks like. In a way, I will just provide relatively rapid, but still not so rapid, overview of the tool capacities and potential. And I will go in a little bit probably reverse order to finish with probably most interesting one. But nevertheless, even if I go in reverse order, this is the page which is providing links to the European and national tools. At the European Union level, we know that there are IONET information data sets, quite important as a data portals, and hydrogeological map of Europe, the droughts in Europe, EFAS map, so perhaps more familiar for you. And I will also switch to multilingual issues, multilingual approach. Yes, it is now. It is also part of the key navigation tools is translated into national languages. This is what we also find quite important. But then if you go also here to Italy, here are listed the key GIS tools and the data portals. And if I just perhaps click randomly on one of them, you might be familiar and say, okay, this is Geoportale dell'ARPA Piemonte. And of course, when you identify and follow the information which is available on this geoportal, you can browse through it, identify the situation, and find out many more things for the Piemonte. Of course, one thing is more one thing are more familiar pages. If I show you, for example, our Slovenian navigation framework, our typical Slovenian navigation for data portal is as a GIS tool is Atlas Voda. It means the atlas or GIS structure of waters. If we go more closely to observe it, there's huge data sets of information, of course, mainly in Slovene. But if you just use either Google Translate or just randomly click and recognize the key features, you can identify and see that the information on the flood hazards, I'm just okay, it is loading. These are the identified flood hazards for a specific zone, and we have similar information available for water quality, water quantity, drinking water protection zones, like for example, vodovarstvena območja. I can turn on, these are drinking water protection zones, usually quite typical information. And yeah, you can see how other countries are actually managing the similar data sets. Sometimes this is also important for the follow-up of this information, especially in the neighboring zones, like the zone with Italy. Of course, also in the neighborhood with Italy, we have some drinking water protection zones. And of course, anybody understanding that the border among the countries cannot really provide a border for the drinking water protection zone would say, yeah, okay, this is the area where we have some more common water management issues. So this is part where in any country you can navigate and find your links. The next component is observation and the evaluation of the measures. If I select not too much narrowly that I'm interested in the gestione del rischio di alluvione di piogge intense, oppure gestione del servizio fluviale, just rischio alluvioni fluviali, and I select that I am more interested in the price, in the relative to robustness and the multifunctionality. I have to this is the programmed AHP method, so I have to be relatively carefully when I'm evaluating the different components. So basically, the system provides here a broad list of possible measures, how to address them, which have to be observed. Usually, we our not professional members are quite limited relative to the spectrum of the measures which could be or should be addressed in the case when we are addressing a specific issue. In this case, we are addressing the flood management issue. So there's a broad catalog of measures, and this is a browsing tool where the user can actually observe, analyze, and think over the possibility of the measures. Other project tools and the link to other project tools are positioned here. The map of the climate indicators, as shown on the basic presentation, is zoomable, and I can zoom quite closer to either Friuli Venezia Giulia or any other region. Select the cumulative precipitation indicator, which is currently selected, and I can see that for the Udine, Italy, the system provides me information on the basis of the selected location, and the user can again browse the following different time horizons and the expected change of a specific indicator. Quite useful and important tool. And if I select, of course, Ljubljana, or Srednje-Slovenska region, these are expected changes for Ljubljana, and this is quite a useful tool especially for the penetration of the thinking that basically we all have to somehow address the issue. This is also observed in the graphic way, so we can also observe how different regions or sub-regions are having some observed trends. I think this one will be more interested. Consecutive precipitation, cumulative, I think so this is the ranking of the legend. So we will be generally warmer. This is the climate change, expected climate change effect. And now to the basically probably most challenging, but also very useful component, which is aimed as multi-user framework for the identification of the issues and how to address them. Here we are having in Slovenia our pilot catchment with already identified issues, and they are structured following the priority area of the actions, campo di azione. And this is the area where I can identify and say that, okay, this is identified measure. Our zone is flood prone. It is close to the mountains. So basically the Kamnik municipality has high mountains on the north, reaching up almost to about 2,600 meters. And the plain underneath is at the level about 300 meters. So they are typical flash flood issue and flooding issues as one of the highest performance. I can use it basically in two ways. One way would be to observe and position ourselves and get the opinion on the already identified measures. So I can provide here my position on the measure, saying yes, I also think that this issue is of the priority and would be resolved soon. So I can post a comment related to a specific issue, but also I can also select which measures might be most suitable to resolve these measures, environmenti, and I can say, okay, I'm voting that this should be related to this measure. So it's some way public participation, public communication measure. But I can also, of course, identify a new issue. And I also know that in this area of very close to here, Buch, we are having currently problem with this small stream. And I can say, okay, I'll add a new issue. Clicca sulla mappa. Yeah. So I would say,
sorry, Primož, only if you can close in 1 minute to permit us to carry out the menti.
Exactly in 1 minute, I will be done. Thank you very much. So I'm saying that I'm here, have this knowledge on, let's say, local public authority, The issue is fluvial flood risk management. The location type is point level, and the land use here is all, or let's say more forest type, and this is road. And I say, okay, save this issue. Which should be saved. Yeah, it's here. And as I position new issue here, I put this position and relative comments on it to other users of this system to enable their positioning and prioritizing also to them. So thank you very much for your attention. And as said by Guido, it's time for your questions to be able to finish in due time. Thank you very much. Guido?
Thank you, Primož. So, as said before, we will have a brief Menti session. So, first of all, I would like to invite you to go to www.menti.com and please check on the code that is reported on the slides. So permitting us, and the first question is about which sector are you working in? We would like to have a better knowledge about the audience to understand if in which ways the tools could be useful for your activities. We will give some seconds for the to connect to the platform and answer to the question. Okay, different. Of course, it is permitted that multiple answers can be accepted at this stage. We wait for a few seconds and after we'll move to the next one. It is important to us to have a better understanding about which could be the sector that interested to our project, to our fundings, and also to tailor the next stages. So land use planning, water protection, but also climate change adaptation, of course, also because the webinar is hosted on the CMCC platform. You'll be interested. We have about, at the moment, 12 responders, but for time constraints, okay, we will move in a few seconds in the next one. Okay, thank you. Now, I would like to ask you to indicate which type of organization you work for. If you are academic, consultancy, NGO, insurance sector, civil protection, public authority, or public administration. Okay. We are arrived more or less to the previous number of participants. So, okay. Barbara and Primož introduced the different fields of action that are the main topics covered by the project. So I would like to ask you which ones could be more related to your daily activities, which are more closer your daily activities and could be, of course, more interesting for you. Okay, interesting that all the fields seem to be covered by our audience, more or less in a homogeneous way, with a preference for pluvial flood risk management, irrigation water management, water scarcity and drought management. Okay. Okay, we have now 17 answers. Okay, okay, it is now stopped. Okay, okay. As said before, as presented by Barbara, teacher project started as a capitalization of the previous Interreg CE project. Now, I would like to ask you if you were aware previously of the teacher CE project and or the other Interreg CE project to be capitalized. Okay, so it's very interesting that it will be the chance of knowing today this project. I hope that will be of interest for you. Of course, by using the CC-ARP-CE platform Toolbox, you can, of course, having a better understanding about the project, about the results, about the main findings reached not only in the teacher, but also in the previous Interreg CE project. Okay, now we have again reached the number of 17 answers. And okay, now it is quite more complex than the other questions, but as explained before by Primož, within the toolbox we have different parts, different tools included in the CC-ARP-CE toolbox. Now I would like to ask you to provide your feedback about how do you consider interesting, useful different tools in CC-ARP-CE. The scale, of course, is the one from 1 to 10, where 1 stands for low in interest and 10 representing high interest. Furthermore, I would like to recall that this link to the Menti will be active for the next 14 days. So if you want to answer, you can share with your colleagues already aware about the toolbox. You can of course do it, and we can collect further answers to our web survey. So okay, the most interesting part are more or less we have a preferences for the first 4 parts: identification of issues, map of the climate indicators, ranking and catalog of measures, and reference to EU and national links. Okay, we have already reached the number of 17 answers. So in a nutshell now, really in a nutshell, I'd like to ask you if you have any prompt, feedback, remarks, suggestions about the tools. If you expect for additional functionality, which could be the criticalities. Also in a nutshell, what could be a potential criticality, or for example, a climate indicators that you expect to be included in the list of the climate indicators that we have computed for the different time span. Okay, it is important to us to collect such suggestions and to understand how to improve. I really know that now for many of you, it is the first time that you have the view of the toolbox, but if you have any prompt feedback, it is important for us to collect such information. Okay, it is asked indicators for extreme weather events. There are many linked, many already computed, a special way for precipitation in terms of percentile or number of days exceeding a fixed threshold. I would like to recall that all the indicators are computed by using a set of Eurocordex simulation at the high resolution of 12 kilometers. The results are computed at the moment as median values and can be, of course, providing a sort of median value among different simulation, different projections. So it also asked a sort of catalog about short information about critical events as a learning tool, also knowledge of the water balance. There is a specific indicators providing the water balance, at least in simple way, as the algebraic sum of precipitation and potential evapotranspiration. It is asked also to provide links with the financing mechanism, for example, for engagement of private stakeholder. It is very interesting suggestions, also linking to Copernicus products for climate indicators that could be more or less linked to our targets, to our goals, probably as provided by Copernicus Climate Change Service. All these ones are very interesting. We should take into account all of these ones. So now, before leaving the floor for, I don't know, for a final question, I would like to recall that in February, the 2nd and 3rd February 2022, we will have our final conference in Reichenau-Raxe in Austria. And so it is reported in the slide, but so will be available also in next days, the forms to register. There is not asked registration fee, but for any further questions, please contact our communication manager, Elizabeth Gerard. Her mail address, it is reported in the slide. So, thanks for your attention. I don't know if there is time. There are not additional questions at the moment. So I don't know. I would like to invite all the participants, if they have any additional questions or curiosity about the platform, please use the question and answers tab. Otherwise, I would like at least to ask, I don't know if to Barbara or Primož, according to them, which could be the next stages, the next frontiers for the platform. How do you consider that could be improved? Which could be the additional functionality, the additional stages, tools that could be easily or less easily implemented in the platform? I don't know if Primož or Barbara would like to.
I can start with a very short answer that we are aiming somehow on or locally discussing with our water agency. And I think that this model of the data might be somehow mirrored either using this platform, which will be now more or less quite open, but it is still a big challenge how to manage this platform. It is not so easy. It has to be somehow managed. And this is our biggest challenge. Now that we are having still ongoing project as a teacher, Central Europe project, we can manage it. And so how to survive with such a platform after the teacher project, after the end of the Central European project, it will still live, but it will have to find its own position, hopefully in some national frameworks. One component which was already discussed, at least after the severe pluvial event in Ljubljana, is perhaps that municipality of Ljubljana, we are discussing with them to use this tool as a survey tool to invite openly invite people which had flooded basements to position their basements to get some information about this event on this. So the biggest challenge, obviously, is of course when you have an operational, functional platform, how to make it really alive. So that is my biggest challenge, how to make it really alive, and how to make users to frequently use it and find their uses of it. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if Barbara can
I agree.
to add something and after to close. Yeah,
I agree. This is always the problem with the project. Actually, the platform can last also after the project end, but it's not improved or it's not living anymore. So it's there. Another issue was in this project that not all countries would like to have data public. Like this was a German problem or German issue that if they inserted their real issues, then it's a problem with publicity of this data. So when now this toolbox is actually still closed and you need username and password, you will need it also afterwards, but you will get it after registration. We have this toolbox is still in the testing phase, but we plan to open the toolbox to everybody, so you can find it on the you will find it on the Teacher CE web page, and then you register. You can register, and then you can try to work with this toolbox, because it's the catalog of measures. We have there almost 200 measures for all fields of actions like floods, heavy rains, drought management, risk management, and also drinking water protection for different land uses such as agriculture, urban area, forested area, and most of them are measures for climate change adaptation, and also measures or best practices on which climate change can have an impact.
Okay, really, it's really interesting. Okay, now we are moving to the end part, but I would like to ask to all the participants for the additional questions, please, to contact us, Professor Barbara Curk or Professor Primo Banovec for additional questions, and we will try answering as soon as possible, or also providing you the access to the platform. Okay, thank you again for very interesting tools to Barbara and Primož. I would like to thank all of you for your participation to today's meeting, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.